Welcome back to the Speaking and Communicating Podcast. I am your host, Roberta Ndlela. If you are looking to improve your communication skills, both professionally and personally, this is the podcast you should be tuning into. Communication and soft skills are crucial for your career growth and leadership development. And by the end of this episode, please log on to Apple and Spotify and leave us a rating and a review. Now let's get communicating with our guest today. Joining us from Florida, Greg Kaiser Sr. is the founder of Management Mastery, who went from the mailroom to the C-suite. He's here to show us that in order to have your best career results and to get promoted and noticed, you need to have some skills that we will be focusing on today during this conversation. And before I go any further, please help me welcome him to the show. Hi, Greg.
Hi, Roberta. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. Why do you think that after all your experiences, you wanted to bring to the attention of your clients that there are some skills that they need to have in order to accelerate their careers?
Okay, I'll stay with the communication theme. I was just recording some videos earlier today, and one of the lines, communication is the most important thing managers do. Because managers typically think of, oh, well, I've got my goals, I've got my objectives, and I've got to put these plans together, and they get it all jumbled up. I'm like, well, those are nice. Everybody else needs to know about them. You need to spend a little bit of time clearly communicating those to people so that everybody's like, yep, got it. I know exactly what it is I'm supposed to do. And more importantly, I know why I'm supposed to do it. So there's a big difference between telling somebody to do something, go do this, and giving somebody direction. Because when you give them direction, you build into that the why part. People don't get motivated by being told to do something. They get motivated when they say, oh, if I do this, this is the outcome that we're going to get. Okay, I can get behind that.
Right.
So, and I keep circling back to this because don't misunderstand me. I like the technical parts of management.
Of course, we all do. We got to get
You
the
know,
work
you know,
done.
I, I, I like the technical parts of it, but
Mm.
but to make those effective, you've got to wrap communication around those and say, okay, I just spent the last 8 hours creating this beautiful plan. And between me and my computer, it's the most beautiful plan ever. Now maybe we should go tell somebody about it.
Don't let it be a secret between the two of you. Because here's the
Yeah.
question we always ask, and maybe Greg, you can shed some light on this. Who
Okay.
is responsible from the time that you are in college or university and you study your craft? Who is responsible to add that communication piece to your technical training? From studying to graduating to the workplace to managerial to leadership. Who?
This is part of why I do what I do. 82%, which is a pretty big number. 82% of new managers, and I don't know if it was Gallup that took this, I forget who did the poll, but it's fairly recent. It was a 2024 poll,
Right.
said they were never trained on how to be a manager. So I ran some of my own polls a couple of years back before I wrote a book. And before I wrote it, I was putting polls out to get information and said, how did you learn how to be a manager? To your question. Guess what the number one answer was? Painfully.
Mm, that's not fun. And therefore, who's
Trial.
responsible to take away that pain along the path to becoming a manager?
Yeah, the number one answer was trial and error. I did things, they didn't work. Somebody told me it didn't work, so then I went and tried something else. Instead of saying, had you done this, let me sit down and show you how to do this thing. If I was in HR, I'd call it development
Mm-hmm.
and train the people. It quick side story. So my stepson got a job in an industry he didn't know that much about. He's an outstanding salesperson,
Right.
but he moved into an industry that he didn't know that much about. So he's there about 2 weeks. He goes to his manager and says, "Hey, you know, I need to learn about the product line. It's a pretty technical product line." And the guy's like, "Well, just go figure it out." I'm like, what?
They don't even
You're,
get training on the actual product they're selling?
yeah. And he's like, just go figure it out. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe the guy could have taken half a day and said, in this portion of our portfolio, this is what the products deliver. In this portion of our portfolio, here's a bunch of technical manuals, and here's the information that we use for marketing. Look these over and then ask me specific questions. Nothing. Just go figure it out.
Wow.
And I have seen this a bunch of times, forget about that industry, in other industries. Just go figure it out is not training. That's trial and error. And when you have a front-facing job like sales, it really matters what you say.
Of
Because
course.
you have these people that are going to send you money, buy from you, and they're relying on what you tell them. And I'm like, oh, geez, just go figure it out.
That
Ah,
sounds, this
correct.
sounds like it is a tough problem in organizations.
It's a tough problem in a lot of organizations. And my observation, this is over decades, right?
Hmm.
In working with a bunch of different organizations, organizations tend to do their training in these tight little silos. So, under the umbrella of communication, they would say, we need to train our managers on conflict resolution, which is a super
Okay.
helpful thing to do.
Right.
My brain goes to, what was the cause of the conflict? Maybe you should train them on that. How do you avoid conflict with your employees? You communicate well with them so that there's no misunderstandings that you're going to argue about later, conflict. But
Right.
that typically is what I've seen. They get narrower and narrower in focus. And there's a point in time in your career where you need that. And so let's say you've now gotten to middle management where you're interacting externally outside the company.
Hmm.
Then you need to know things like, okay, I need to know negotiation skills. I probably need to have some public speaking skills because you're
Yes.
interacting with the public. Prior to getting into middle management, you should have these, I call them foundational. You should have these foundational parts of management pretty well down
Hmm.
before you start launching into these really surgical applications. They're easier to market because it's very easy to do a problem statement around something like conflict resolution.
Right.
Everybody's had conflict at work. Their hair's on fire and they're like, oh, I'd love to fix that. You know?
Right. But you
And
highlighted a very good point when you said it's better to nip it in the bud. It's better to create the kind of environment where the conflict is minimized to begin with.
yes,
Mm.
and that's, one of the other things. I have a course on business communications. And one of the things that I talk about is eh, companies want to have a good culture. They want to have a healthy culture.
Right.
And culture is a function of consistently communicating. Your on message is a term that some people use, but
Hmm.
you're consistently communicating with your employees and your teams. Hey, this is where we're going, and this is. I never forget a lady said this to me one time. I was in doing a consulting engagement. And I'm asking her, like, so what's the culture here? And she's like, I don't know. I can tell you how we do things around here. I'm like, that's what I need to know. How do you do things around here? And, because she
Mm.
didn't think in terms of culture.
Right,
She just knew
right.
how things got done in the company.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, I'm a consultant. I would call that culture. And she laughed and she's like, that's more important to me to know how to get things done around here. Like, got it.
Like you
Okay.
were saying at the beginning that the actual communication also is to why we do what we do, so that you can understand
Yes,
how it fits into the bigger picture. Whatever you
exactly.
do, your little piece, how it fits into the bigger puzzle. So now, when it comes to whatever career that you aspire to have and how you'd like to grow your career, when an individual contributor, really brilliant at their job, is now promoted to lead people, what are some of the skills that you've realized they really need to have to not just do trial and error and painfully make the transition?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways you can look at it. When you're a really good individual contributor, typically you're functionally focused. You have a job. I'm a software developer. I'm a salesperson, single salesperson, and I'm really good at that. I have really good skills around writing code and developing software. I have really good skills around closing sales, overcoming objections. Once you move the people to the next level, those skills are not nearly as important. Now you have to back up and say, oh, geez, now my job is to get other people to do all these things. So I need interpersonal skills. So the way I try to explain it to people, I'm like, okay, you've moved up to the managerial level. You're
Mhm.
ascending this ladder, right?
Right.
You go from functional individual contributor, then you go to manager, first line, then manager, manager, executive. As you move through those levels, you have to look at the company internally and externally, depending on the level you're at. And I try to wrap this into two things: intersections and interactions. So
Hmm.
the simple example I give, if you work in even a medium-sized company, you have a computer on your desk.
Right.
Therefore, you have an intersection with the IT department. You don't really interact with them. You have a computer on your desk and IT manages that infrastructure, so you have an intersection with them. When you
Hmm.
have a problem with your computer and you have to call the help desk, now you're interacting with the IT department. And people are like, oh yeah, it's an entirely different relationship. I said, you have to go through all these other levels
Right.
and say, am I intersecting with this person or am I actually interacting with this person? Because I'll behave much differently once I, classify it one way or the other.
Mm.
And you have to paint a picture for people. And the IT one, because pretty much everybody's experienced being on that phone with the help desk.
Right.
And they
Yes.
they understand that one. Or if you're like a first line manager, your intersection with the finance department is you get a paycheck. When you go to
Okay.
the next level, you now interact with the finance department to negotiate a department budget. Well, that's a really
Mm.
different conversation. It's not a one-way conversation. Now it's back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
And you start to understand a bigger context for the business. Well, I have my budget. It's the most important thing to me in the world. Well, the person one department over's budget is the most important thing to them in the
To
world.
them. Yes.
And the finance team is the one that's got to manage that mess.
And try to satisfy everybody's budget with a
Yeah.
limited
Well,
budget.
or slightly dissatisfy everybody. And then, yeah.
Yes. What was that in economics class? Then it creates the scarcity and and then the opportunity cost of, okay, Greg, if you get this, you're not gonna get that. It's almost like
Well,
this
that's
trade-off every single
Yeah,
time.
that's the key word. It's a trade-off discussion. And until you're a little bit more mature as a manager,
Right.
you get offended. You're like, what do you mean I can't have this thing that I told you I need? Like, Well, if I give you the thing I told you you need, I can't give the R&D people the money they need to come up with our next product. Oh, okay. Yeah, got it.
Right, exactly. That's right. So now talk to us about, you say there's a way in which you move from strategy to execution. How do businesses do that?
Principally rooted in communication. And the word I use to describe it is, strategy is an idea.
Hmm.
This is what we aspire to be. This is how we're going to compete and how we're going to win. Execution is a series of actions. So you start up here at the strategy level, you have to translate that strategy through the different levels of the organization. Translation is the word I use.
Right.
And the reason you translate things is so that the person you're talking to understands it. So you can't. I spent a fair amount of time in manufacturing plants over the course of my career.
Mm,
It's not helpful to go in to a manufacturing plant and talk to them about high level strategy. It's really helpful to go in and say, when you do this, this, and this, and we keep our cost per unit to this, and your labor productivity is this, it contributes to what we're trying to do at an enterprise level strategically. This is how you feed, your outputs feed the rest of the organization. You have to translate it down to a level that when they go to work, they say, I'm important. I know what I do is important to the whole company. And that's
right.
motivating. So it's that translation aspect that you can't just deliver these lofty statements from on high and think everybody's going to understand them. That's just not what they do every day. The
Hmm.
guys from McKinsey, they could go into any company and understand a strategy because it's all they do all day long and they're really good at it.
Right.
But you take the average person in a company, they may see the company strategy once a year, but the rest of the time that they're at their job, doing their job,
Mm.
it's pretty far removed from that. So you have to personalize it for them. You have to translate it so
It's
so that they
mm,
feel good about what they do.
because they can see how what they do on a daily basis connects to, as we were saying, the bigger picture.
Exactly.
They don't have to be experts in the bigger picture, but just a general understanding of it. But they need to be experts in what they do on a daily basis.
Right. To go back to your question one or two back, as you're moving people up through the different levels in an organization, this is also something organizations, some do it well, some don't.
Mhm.
They don't train them to think that way. When
Mm,
you're at level A, this is your world and this is what you have to understand, and this is how we're going to measure your effectiveness in that role. When you go to the next level up, you're now at level B. Okay, your bandwidth has to expand because now you have to consider all these other things, all these other interactions with the rest of the organization. And people, it's difficult for people that haven't experienced it to like intuitively understand it. You have to sit down and show them this. It's always fascinating to me to talk to chief executive officers.
right.
You can ask them about any part of the organization and they can speak intelligently about it. And I'm like, how do they get that bandwidth? Well, they worked really hard at it for probably decades. They understand sales, they understand marketing, they understand R&D. They understand all these different parts of the company.
Mhm.
They know how to pull them together and provide direction to all those different parts of the company. And that is not an intuitive skill set. You're not born with that. You have to be trained to do
Right.
those kinds of things. And so I have an MBA. An MBA is not a good training to learn how to do those things. I can tell you this as somebody that has one.
Is it?
Getting an MBA will train you how to tear apart a balance sheet and take it back through the income statement and the cash flow statement and tie them all back together. So it gives you good financial literacy.
So it prepares you to be a CFO, not CEO?
Yeah, they're different skills.
Mm.
Now, some CFOs do eventually go on and become CEOs.
Right.
It's not a real typical path. The CEO, they're interested in everything. They're curious about everything. That's one of the things, when you're talking about communication,
Hmm.
how curious are you? If you're not curious, you won't ask a lot of questions. So,
I
and
think
how do you
Tony
train?
Robbins does say it's the quality of your questions.
Part of it is the quality of the question,
Mm-hmm.
but if you're genuinely curious, you ask people about what they do. Well, tell me about what you do.
Mm.
Why do you do it that way? Oh, what else have you tried? Oh, okay. And you'll have a much more interesting conversation than this is how it's very difficult to go in and tell somebody else how to do their job. They do
Yeah.
it every day. But if you go in and you start uncovering how they do their job, and when you're at different levels, you can say, I've seen this work other ways, other places. Have you ever thought about looking at this? So one of the weird communication habits that I picked up very early in life, if I see, and I read a lot, if I see something that looks interesting, I email it to people. Hey, I
Right.
know you're in this space. This might be interesting to you. Yeah, and some of them get back to me and say, I had never seen that. And some of them don't because their mailbox probably has 300 emails in it. It's difficult to wade through it.
Happens.
But that was a little tip I picked up from a consultant actually.
Mm.
He said, "This is how you teach yourself to think about other people broadly. So you're not in the marketing department, but the people in the marketing department think about marketing a lot. So you read an article about marketing and you send it to somebody in marketing and say, "Hey, I thought you'd be interested in this because you're in marketing.
Mm.
What do you think? How does this work in our organization?" And they'll either pick up the phone and call you or they'll send you an email back. But it's a good way to learn because you're instigating the exchange. You're initiating the conversation.
Right.
Otherwise, you might never interact with that person. It's an outreach model.
Mm-hmm. You interact, even though you're not intersecting with them. There's no
Correct.
intersection because you're from different departments,
You're
but
jumping over that, right?
you created that interaction with them.
But once you've created the interaction, you have also simultaneously created an intersection because
Oh,
now
okay.
they know you're interested in what they do.
Mm.
And I learned this I was a salesman earlier in my career. My sales manager said, pay attention to what the marketing people do. I said, well, okay, why? And he said, the better they are at their job, the easier our job is. I'm like,
Mm, that's a
okay,
good one.
got
Yeah.
it. I'm like, I
You
gotta
don't
get to know
have to
these
do much
market.
sales. They're already taking care of the
Yeah.
sales, most of the sales
I'm like, I
part.
gotta get to know these marketing people. The better they are at their job, the
Yeah.
easier my job is.
That's actually very true. Yes, yes. Hmm. Right. So, Greg, any professional who wants to accelerate their careers and they're really good at their jobs, what recommendations could you give to them in order to add some skill set to make that possible?
Yeah, yeah, you and I talked about this briefly offline. Um, the one thing you can do, and it gets easier the higher up you get in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
When you're moving up through the organization, it's all new territory for you. So I put together this tool called the communication compass.
Right.
Use a compass to figure out where you're going, right? So if you're communicating at the same level you're currently occupying, there's a way to do that. If you're communicating to levels above you, there's a really different way you need to learn how to do that. And typically, people learn this through like painful experiences of getting in front of somebody in the C-suite, and they're like, I don't need that much detail. I don't need that much detail. Summarize this for me. Summarize this for me. We have a lot to do. You're like, ooh, you can train people how to do that. They want an
Mhm.
executive summary and they want a proposal for what you think should be done. Then you let them ask you questions and you can supply more detail. Don't give them all the detail up front. They just don't have time for it. And it's really difficult unless you've been in one of those positions. That's hard to understand.
Mhm. We actually do highlight that, especially when you talk about presentations and slides and what should be in there, too much of this and not enough of that, that when you first understand who your audience is going to be, you will know exactly how what to put in there, how summarized
Yes.
it should be, if you just need to give them the headline or a summary or details, depending on
Yep.
who the audience is. So when you know that you're going to present to the C-suite just, headline information, you're not going to put a whole lot of detail in there. It's probably for your peers.
But this is what you train people to do, right? This
Mm,
is what your organization trains people to do. Well, until you got there, they might not know that. These are
right.
people that are super enthusiastic about their jobs. They love what they do and they want to tell everybody about what they do. And they don't really understand the jobs of the people that are levels above them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also like, well, I have my chance. I'm in front of the chief, whatever
Let me
officer.
impress them. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to tell them everything I know about this subject. I'm like,
Yeah.
they,
He's only got 5 seconds.
yeah, like if
Right.
you're having lunch with them, they might find it interesting. If
Mm.
you're in a meeting room and it's a 30-minute meeting, they don't have time. They
Five
just
seconds
don't
each
have
person
time.
gets for sure. So yes, those communication skills, I think you've managed to just highlight in different aspects and different roles how much of how crucial communication skills are when it comes to the workplace, especially. Any last words of wisdom for any of our listeners?
Sure. So I'll go back to what I said at the beginning.
Hmm.
Communication is the most important thing that managers do. So the better they get at that, that is the super career accelerant
Hmm.
because when you're able to concisely convey a message that you're actually transferring information to the person that when they receive it, they're like, well, that was valuable.
Right.
They're going to come back and talk to you a lot more versus people who dump all kinds of stuff on them that they don't find a lot of value in. They're probably not going to spend a lot of time with them. But if you can concisely deliver them information that they find valuable,
Hmm.
they remember who you are.
Always, yeah. I still remember even people who taught me so much that especially it was my first time hearing a little, oh goodness, I need to do
Yeah.
that. Yes, you
Yeah.
remember those
Oh,
people.
I
You
I said
certainly
this to
do.
somebody. I said this to. I try to learn new things every day, and I said this to somebody the other day. I'm like, geez, I wish I would have learned this 20 years ago. I could have been using it for the last 20 years.
It's never too late. Greg Kaiser,
Exactly.
Senior, founder of Management Mystery. Thank you so much for being on our show today. Do you have a website or any socials where our listeners can find you?
I do. Thank you. So, our website is called Management Mastery. That's all one word.
Hmm.
Dot solutions.
Okay.
We solve problems. So it's Management Mastery dot solutions. And then I post regularly on LinkedIn primarily. I have some content out on Medium, and it's all under Greg Kaiser. LinkedIn is
Okay.
under Management Mastery. That's a business post. And
Right.
then I also post some stuff on Facebook under Management Mastery.
Okay. We'll put it there on the show notes. Greg Kaiser Senior, thank you so much for joining us today, founder of Management Mystery, who was here to highlight how crucial communication skills are at any level in the organization. Thank you, Greg, for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Roberta. That was a lot of fun. And thank you for taking me along the path and steering me to where we needed to go.
My absolute pleasure. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify, and stay tuned for more episodes to come.